welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff people do in marketing and how you cannot do those things, but instead do meaningful, smart marketing things that matter to your business. And at the end of the day, I think this is what everybody wants in their marketing, in their lives, things that matter. Yet at the same time, there are a lot of things that distract us from having those. And I was thinking about this all morning because I never introduced myself. I'm Tracy. I'm your host for today. And we're going to be talking about something that I do think can get very distracting for people, which is SEO. And if you're not familiar what SEO stands for, it stands for search engine optimization. And it's one of these kind of jargony phrases that marketers love to throw around the marketing industry. And I think it's a lot of times a thing people think they have to do, but they don't know enough about it. Should I outsource it? What's the relationship between SEO and keywords? There's a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of mysteries that lie behind the scenes of SEO. And luckily for you all today, we have Chris joining us, who is going to demystify some of these things so that we can actually understand what really is SEO, when might we need it, when might we not, when might we want to update, when might we want to outsource, not want to outsource, all of the things. And so if you are joining us live, please let us know that you are joining us live. And if you happen to be joining us because you have a question about SEO, this is the time. Please ask it. Pop it into the comments section, and we will see it. And we will get all those questions answered so that no more magic. I mean, there's still probably some behind the scenes magic that happened for SEO perspectives, but you'll have a better understanding of what it is and whether or not you want to spend any more time getting to know it more personally. So before we jump into the conversation, let's learn a little bit more about our guest. Chris, tell us a little bit more about you and the role that SEO plays in your world.
My God, after that intro, I feel like I'm doing witchcraft or something. It's like the mystical SEO that nobody really knows about and everybody has an opinion about. I'll give a really quick intro to myself, and then people can ask more questions if they want to, or we can talk more later. But I think I started as a blogger. I was never really like a super technical person. It just started from content creation, and I created my own blog in 2018. And I sort of really quickly realized that I could, like, to get eyes on my stuff that I was writing stuff and putting it out on Twitter, and sometimes that worked okay, and then eventually later I'd put it on LinkedIn, and sometimes that worked okay. But the really rewarding stuff came when I realized that, hey, you can actually optimize content so that the content you create actually brings in people again and again and again. And instead of having like do this once and get a hit for a day with some views, I can actually do this once and maybe it'll pay dividends for months and years to come. So it was really just as a blogger that I started playing around with SEO. I took some courses, so I started to kind of learn. And at the time, I was running a consulting business, doing like totally unrelated stuff. Coming out of, I'd worked for government. I was doing policy type stuff, project management, stuff like that. And I realized somewhere along the way that actually brands really needed SEO as well. And the stuff that I was doing quite successfully for my website was stuff that people were in many cases trying and in some cases failing to do for their own websites. So I slowly kind of morphed my consulting business towards doing SEO strategy and content too. So kind of a mixture of the two for brands. So that's what I do today. I do a mixture of SEO, content strategy, and I don't have a ton of clients. I like to just work with a couple clients that I can really go deep on and really make a big difference in their SEO. So.
Oh, okay. So let's actually start there, Chris, because I think a lot of times there's an assumption from an SEO perspective that like the quote unquote keywords for an industry are all the same. So that theoretically, then if we're all optimizing for the same keywords. Now, talk to me a little bit about whether that works or doesn't work and what you might want to look at instead.
Yeah, I'll say a few things about keywords, and then you tell me if I'm answering the question. But I I like keywords are a great starting point. When I'm planning content, I'm always looking at keywords because behind the keyword is a person. And I think that's the important thing to remember. I remember in the early days of SEO, it was kind of the Wild West, and people would just try to stuff as many keywords into their content as you could to signal to Google, like, hey, this is what this is about because the keyword is in this page 275 times. Really, I think I do. I mean, I think a lot about keywords, but really what I think about is people. So what are the people behind this search actually trying to figure out? And if they're searching for, like, I don't know, how to fix my dishwasher, or how, what is a good alternative to Shopify or something like that. Like those are keywords that ultimately have like a human behind them. So I do use keywords all the time, and I use keyword tools to find keywords. But usually, and especially, I've become a lot more successful with SEO, and my content ranks better as I think less and less about, like, how can I optimize for this keyword, or how can I stuff as many keywords in, and thinking more about, like, what is the person who's searching for this actually wanting to know, or even in some cases just wanting to see or get, and how can I give that to them as effectively as possible. So that's kind of where I start from keywords. The other thing I would say, and this is like more of a big picture marketing thing, but I think one of the mistakes people make a lot with SEO with keywords is not really understanding what they actually want out of SEO. So for example, I think if you think of, the kind of standard marketing funnel image, you get top of funnel is where all the traffic is, but not necessarily all the right traffic, or not necessarily all the right, leads or whatever it is you're doing SEO for. In most cases, for most businesses, you want a customer at the other end of it. And that goes all the way down to bottom of funnel, where you're getting very few, in some cases, people searching for certain words every month, but those might be exactly the people you want to find you. So it's actually important to know, as you're thinking through keywords, like what you actually want out of your SEO strategy. Do you want just tons of traffic and tons of visibility from people who might not necessarily need what you have? For most brands, especially like when you're working with businesses, there's probably a bit of both, but in my experience, many people just go way too high in the funnel with SEO and are trying to compete with like Forbes and Shopify and some of these huge brands. And really often, I think one of the best places to start with keywords is to look at like your specific ideal customer. What are they searching for? And again, like long tail, be as specific as possible. So I don't know, it might not be like how to start a business online, which a lot of people are searching for. Maybe it's like how to sell, I don't know, cat furniture online or something. That was a really weird example. So you kind of like as you get more long tail, you probably have a lot more success. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is a good example though, because there would be people who would be looking for cat furniture online, and there would be people who are not looking for cat furniture online. And I think I'd love to just kind of dig into that piece a little bit, because I know specifically in the tech arena, I've experienced this, is that people try to compete, quote unquote, compete on keywords. And so it's like the same keyword. Now I'm going to use it a whole bunch more times than you, so hopefully I rank higher. What are your thoughts on this concept of competing on keywords? Because what I'm hearing you say is more so trying to like get into your client's head to get their words, instead of like, quote unquote, competing on a keywords across an industry or a local region or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there are times when you have to compete. I mean, SEO is competitive by nature, just like any other marketing. You're always fighting for eyeballs, and there's fewer eyeballs than people who want the eyeballs. So there always is a little bit of competition. I think the bottom funnel stuff is a great place to kind of have less competition, but I think for most businesses, there is a place where you need to go higher up in the funnel, even knowing like we're not going to rank necessarily number one for this, but we need this content to be out. Maybe we can find other ways to share it too, if you've got email or your LinkedIn page or whatever, sharing it in other places. I think the other important thing to know, and this is like, I'll try to explain this really vaguely without getting too technical, but I think like Google, most of the time when we're talking about SEO, we're talking about Google searching for the time being. So Google sort of knows like what, as you create a website, as you start growing pages, let's say you have a blog, you're writing blog posts, Google sort of starts to know like what you are an authority on. So it's an important way of thinking about SEO too, is sort of building authority and trustworthiness around a certain subject. So as the more you build an authority in like your specific domain, whatever you define that to be, and you might have 50 blog pages or you might have 5,000 blog pages, but there's going to be kind of a circle of like the things that you talk about, the things that Google knows you talk about. And often, just when it comes back to the competition, you're a little bit more likely to do better in the things that Google kind of trusts you for, than like if I all of a sudden go and create a random page somewhere else. So I think that's where competition is sort of like, I guess to kind of sum that up, it's like really knowing what you want, but just kind of knowing what your domain is, I guess, and playing in that, kind of sticking to, and not necessarily sticking always, like you can write about anything you want, but understanding that you're going to do better as you create authority around a certain topic or cluster of topics.
Yeah, and I think that even like the concept too of like using SEO to build authority versus using SEO to rank for keywords, right? Like I think there's a different level of ownership and knowing, why am I doing that? Like I'm doing this activity to build authority. I'm not doing this activity just because someone told me I should, because it's good for the health of my website or something. And I'm not saying that that's a bad reason either, right? If you're just creating content in that arena to like keep your website fresh, right? That's also fine, but you know the reason why you're doing it. And it's not just because, so there's two things that are sticking out to me in terms of stories. Right? So I remember going to a conference and asking, having a conversation with this guy over lunch and asking him about his marketing program. He was like, oh, we just find out what our competitors' keywords are and then optimize for their keywords. And I was like, I mean, you make a good point on the competition piece, right? Like there might be stuff in there that you don't want to not at all talk about because you want to maintain a presence in that conversation. But that's totally driven by who they are and not who you are. So while the research isn't necessarily bad, just like straight up copying, again, it comes for me, it comes back to like, why? For what purpose? Because like you won't build authority by just copying your competitors. That doesn't work like that. And the other scenario that comes up with, I worked for a company and they were very big on like everybody at the company having the opportunity to write blog posts on behalf of the company and showing that like, hey, we have this diverse expertise in the company. The company did custom, well, not even really custom software, but like custom voice software solutions. And I remember one of the employees writing an article about like workplace design, like how you arrange desks and stuff to like make people feel welcome or whatever. And I was like, this seems not in alignment with the brand reputation. And so it was interesting then, because you almost have this balance of, yes, we're doing these things and they will or will not contribute to a brand reputation, which we don't want to be confusing for people. But at the same time, we do have a value as a business of like incorporating the entire team. So now, and this is what I heard in your share too, in the competition, like kind of just a balance between like knowing what we want, making sure we show up. Like we're not going to win the game if people don't know we're playing the game. But how do we create that formula for how much of what comes from what place?
Yeah. And there's a branding, like leaning into your specialization too. Like, I mean, I often do look at competitors, especially if you're creating SEO strategy for somebody for the first time. It's like, what's working? What are people doing? Whereas we have great tools that can show us like where competitors' traffic is coming from and how many people a month go there and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, ideally, if you're going to like that can be a frame for helping you create content, but it should also be like because you have something unique to say about it. So finding your unique take on content, finding your unique voice, hopefully that's part of SEO too, not just like, you know, getting either, it used to be like you would, you know, hire somebody for $10 an hour to do it. Now sometimes maybe people are just using AI, I don't know, but like whatever AI creates is not going to represent your brand voice like in the same way as if you actually do the work to find it. This is another conversation. I'm not talking about AI yet. We can go there later if people want to. But yeah, I think like ultimately it's like any other, any other business. If you're looking around realizing there's a marketplace here, you need to know like what's your unique take, what's your unique value, what's your selling proposition. If you're selling something, there's probably something you believe you do better than your competitors. So how do you position that way? So yeah, it is like there's definitely competition. There's definitely competition in SEO. But yeah, hopefully you kind of find your own voice as you muddle through it. I was just going to say for the company, the other thing about SEO though is often sometimes it's the stuff that surprises you that you don't really think is going to work, and it does. You like any other marketing, there's a lot of testing involved. So maybe the thing about the desk furniture isn't the worst thing to try, and put it up in your website, and it's probably not going to hurt anything. At worst case scenario, might just not get found. But yeah, so I'm also a firm believer in lots of experimentation and well, lots within reason, because we all have limited time and energy. But yeah, nothing wrong with running an experiment now and then.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, like, and again, if the goal, I mean, let's be honest, that company mostly had the internal staff that was reading the blog, not like external, like potential clients or anything like that. So it was nice to be able to like hear someone's perspective about something you wouldn't normally hear about, because we're always talking work related stuff. Well, I'm just going to go quickly to the comments here with some no questions, but just quickly saying hello to Judy and I Care who are joining us. If you guys do have questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Or if you haven't shared and you're secretly watching us still and you have a question, please share that as well. Okay, so let's talk about, because you see a lot of people doing a lot of SEO things, and you also do content strategy. So when you're talking about content, what is the relationship that you like to talk about between content and SEO?
I think I know we talked for the first time a few months ago, and I remember saying this, that it's just like, I think a lot of people don't understand what SEO actually is. And I think the SEO industry in many ways is responsible for this, that we sort of think it's this technical thing and you need to have backlinks somehow, and you need to have paid site speed, and you need to have all these sort of technical whatever, and keywords even sounds a little bit technical. And I think what I've realized over the years, you do need some of those things. Like, you're not going to win at SEO if your site takes 5 minutes to load, so like those things have to be there. But once the technical things are in place, what really matters is great content. And that's what, like, if you look at Google, and Google's constantly releasing updates, and I don't know, I may get some pushback in the comments on this one, but often what Google is doing, unfortunately, it does hurt a lot of smaller publishers, but Google is often trying to surface better and better content. Again, I fully expecting to get some pushback here on this one. But yeah, I mean, if you're creating like the best possible content you can, that the search engine can understand it, but it's also so that the search engine can serve it up to somebody who really wants to know the answer to something. So that's what I think is like keeping that end user in mind. And I think when we talked, what I said to you is like, I'm actually a creative person. I'm not really a technical person. I do work with technical people who do technical SEO and do all that kind of stuff. But my day-to-day doing SEO content and strategy is sort of like planning the content we're going to create, creating it, and going back and looking at what's working, what isn't. Like, there is a technical side to it, but mostly it's just like being creative and bringing that creative side of what I do. So I think, like, in the same way that posting on Instagram is a creative skill, SEO is a creative skill too. And it's just like any other marketing. Like, if it's not good, it's not going to get seen. So to me, that's the discipline of SEO, is actually creating something that people love to read, or now increasingly it could be watch, it could be listen to, all those things. But that's really what SEO is in my mind.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a question with that, but we're going to go to comments first for a question about the algorithm, because I feel like everybody wonders about the algorithm. So how do we keep relevant when the algorithms keep changing? What are your thoughts
how do you
on
keep
that,
relevant?
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the algorithm changed. So for people who don't know the industry as much, like, Google has done a lot of really big algorithm changes in the last couple of years. I mean, Google was always updating its search algorithm, but the last few years have been really disruptive to the industry. It's really hurt a lot of small publishers, unfortunately, which I kind of alluded to. And I think with it also kind of coincided with the rise of AI and Google feeling like ChatGPT was going to put it out of business at the time, and all these things, people putting AI content on websites. All that to say, the algorithm is changing a lot, and often my personal blog is basically tanked now. It's maybe my own fault because I don't really do anything on it, but it was really sad to watch it kind of nicely humming along, creating some passive income with advertisements, and all of a sudden it's just pretty much gone. So the algorithm is, I don't know. I mean, there are people selling all sorts of solutions. I'm in certain Facebook groups and I can see people who say like, oh, buy this course and it'll teach you to recover from the newest Google update. Unfortunately, I don't really see any evidence that there's anybody who really knows how to recover. I actually like met somebody who'd worked on the Google search engine recently, like who'd worked at Google, and just he had said to me like, nobody really, like, even at Google, we don't completely understand the search engine. Like, it's a huge thing if you think about the billions of web pages that it's indexing and searching through. So I think really the only thing you can just do is like keep trying to create good content. And sometimes, I mean, if you're looking at what's ranking, if you, I don't know, you were ranking what number 1 for something and now you're ranking number 10, if you go look at what's ranking number 1, sometimes you're going to see that, well, this is fresher content, or maybe they have nicer visuals, or maybe they have, like, often you can see just by looking the reason why you might not be ranking number 1 anymore. But yeah, I mean, trying to outthink and outsmart Google will just drive you crazy. Like, it's much better use of your time to just create the very best content you possibly can, and maybe also like look at creating content that you can also share in other ways too, so you can get eyes on it in other ways too. So email, or social media, whatever. Find ways that you can get your content out into the world that doesn't just rely on Google. But yeah, I mean, trying to fight Google is a very frustrating thing.
I just wouldn't want to try to fight Google. That's a heavyweight.
Yeah. That's a heavyweight. Yeah, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but trying to outsmart or outthink Google or whatever, like, it's all you can
they
really
did
do
a
is
lot of thinking behind the scenes to make those things happen. Well, and I think the important thing in that comment too is that like the algorithms will keep changing, and so I've always thought that there's only so much value in trying to quote unquote hack the algorithm, because 2 months from now the algorithm is going to be different, and then I need to learn a new hack. And now I just feel like this has become an industry where people sell the hacks, and then it distracts you from playing your game. So I think that the key in this question is keeping relevant. So what does it look like to be relevant, or what does it look like to feel that you're being relevant? Because maybe the algorithm doesn't reward you, but are you actually doing the things that you would do to stay relevant?
Yeah, updating content is fantastic. So keeping relevant could be updating old content. I think often one of the things, like, this has changed a little bit, but our rule of thumb 3 or 4 years ago was like, if you create a blog post or article or whatever today, it's going to take at least like 16 to 18 months to get like to full steam on Google to like where it's going to be. So it takes some time for content to age. That's changed a little bit. So coming back to like the updates, so sometimes you'll see stuff that was posted yesterday on the front page of Google today. So again, can't even, like, I can't hack the algorithm either. But it is important to like keep your stuff updated and relevant. If like there's a post that is your bread and butter post that you need people coming to for your business because it books leads or creates sales or gets people on your email list or whatever, it really is worth looking at that post like every month or two and just being like, is it as good as it could be? Does it need a rewrite? Does it need a visual? Does it need a video? Maybe video is great to embed a video, and then you can put it on YouTube and get YouTube SEO too. So finding ways to just keep content as good as possible. And just an aside, like, I think one thing people forget too, because we talk a lot about the algorithm, I think the untold story of SEO is how much big companies are getting into the game. And I think a lot of small publishers who've really seen their sites hurt over the last couple of years see it as like algorithm changes, which it obviously is. But I think too, it's important to recognize that like this speaks to the power of SEO, because brands are still investing in it big time. If you go look at, I mentioned Shopify a few times, go look at HubSpot. Like, some of these brands are doing a ton of work on SEO. So what you have all of a sudden is like, my little blog is now competing with a team at HubSpot. Or I remember I had a career blog. So I had this one post, it was like high income skills you can teach yourself. I loved it. It got like almost like 40,000 views a month sometimes. It was like this huge bread and butter post. And now it's probably like Indeed or Forbes or something at the top of that. And it's not just because the algorithm changed, it's because they all saw that and said, hey, we want to go after that traffic that this person's getting. So I think it's important too, is like, for small publishers, trying to compete with some of the big guns, unfortunately, is getting harder and harder. So it's, yeah, that's another part of the story. It's not just the algorithm, I think.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing about all things, is there's not one thing that's the whole story. There's many parts of the story. Like here is sharing here, I'm using the periodic table of SEO to stay focused on where I can improve my SEO. I don't even know what that is.
I don't know what that is. That must be a resource I haven't heard of, but I'll have to Google it after.
Yeah, or if you want to share it in a link, like, that is also great.
Yeah.
And so Kavita is tuning in. Hello. She studies intense and hopefully can understand prompt engineering better coming up. And her question is, Chris, how would you suggest UX researchers see SEO and its ever-changing nature?
That's a really cool question. I think I'm just gonna take a shot at this one. I don't know if this is completely right, but I'm seeing, like, one of the things when I look at what's working in SEO is it is coming down more and more to UX, and it's more than just user experiences. Like, for a long time it was like, is your site mobile friendly? Because, like, that's a small user experience thing, but it matters. But more and more, it's like, how are users actually engaging with content? I think this is a huge thing for SEO, and something that I don't know. I think there's a lot of work that could be done in, like, learning how to optimize pages with UX by actually understanding. Because again, it's a person. We like to think we're tricking a search engine. You're actually trying to get somebody to read it. So using UX principles to design content and to look at how people engage with web pages, I think, is really promising. It's not something I think I do it a little bit instinctively, but not as somebody with a background in UX. So it's a great question. That's like my very simple answer. I hope that helps a little bit. But yeah, UX has a lot of promise for interacting with SEO in some interesting ways.
Well, and I think that I think the simplicity there, Chris, of that, if UX is very much focused on the user experience. This is why it's called that. And so if your SEO is also focused on the user experience and how the user can more easily find things, then it does make sense that the two are intricately combined. But I also think it's interesting as like kind of a like step 2 or step 3 from a UX perspective, because I feel like from a design development perspective, a lot of times we like create the user experience and then it stays pretty consistent for quite some time. We're not constantly iterating on the user experience. However, we can pretty consistently be iterating on content and how SEO is tied into that user experience to see how the content is contributing. And I love that concept because, again, the like freshness of the content, the what makes it relevant, right? The relevance of it, like how does that play into your user experience, and how are they correlated? Because I don't think there's like one is dependent on the other, but they're definitely correlated. So how are we paying attention to that correlation as we look at all of those things? And we're not even just then creating content to create content. We're creating content as a user experience. What's the difference between creating content as a user experience than it is in just like creating content to create content?
I think if anybody wants to go see it on my LinkedIn page, I did like a 4-minute teardown of HubSpot a while back, and I was going to start doing SEO teardowns, and I did one, and you know how these things are. But anyway, the one that I actually did with HubSpot, it's interesting when you look at what HubSpot's doing, because often, and I think this kind of speaks to UX, that HubSpot, the stuff HubSpot is creating for SEO is often not like an article anymore. It's often like a thing. So to give you an example, the one I think it was an email signature, and it said like how to write an email signature or something. But when you went to the page, it was actually an email signature generator. So they had used AI or something to like create this generator, and it was, it was ranking number one, it was getting tons of traffic. And I thought that's like an interesting statement on, again, it's like UX, but it's like actually understanding what the user actually wants, because they don't actually want to know how to create an email signature. They want an email signature. So
Right.
HubSpot is actually like taken out the process of me going to read about it, and it just does it for me. So that's actually a really cool, I think, example. And I think we're going to see SEO go more to these types of places too, that like, in some cases you do want information, but in some cases you just want something done. And that's, I think there's going to be a lot of UX kind of carryover there too. So fun things to watch for the future.
Yeah, and I think too, like stuff like that is interesting because also it's something that's not like overly brandy, right? An email signature,
Yeah.
like yeah, sure, it has brand guidelines, but it's an email signature, right? Most people's email signatures look pretty similar. And so I put in my stuff I created. This doesn't need to be something a human brain spends a lot of time on.
Right.
And so again, if you're looking at these things from a user perspective, people are like, I just want my email signature. I don't want to read about it and like create it while I'm reading about it. I just want it. And then it's also got that kind of viral nature of it though, right? Like, hey, did you see HubSpot's new email, whatever generator? Like, go check it out. And then all of a sudden everybody's talking about it. Which is the thing that's interesting about virality, because while it's not predictable, human behavior is somewhat predictable. And as soon as we get a hold of something that like makes our lives easier, we're like, oh my gosh, have you heard of this? This is amazing. You should try it. And then, hey, who cares what keywords are on the page? Okay, but wow, that was really squeaky. Bill is going here. Chris, are you ready to go here with the AI?
Yeah.
Where does AI come into the world of SEO? Do you think synthetic information can go viral?
So AI, I think the simplest answer to this question is I don't know, but that feels like a cop-out. So
also, Chris, I'm just going to say, because I happen to know that Bill has some knowledge in this arena. So Bill, if you have thoughts on your own question, please feel free to share them as well.
So I mean, I use AI all the time, but I still don't use AI to write posts. So I use AI to research, I use AI to outline, I use AI, like one of the things I've loved recently, this is my AI hack, is like, if you need to review something, going to review sites and copying everything and getting AI to summarize it, stuff like that. But yeah, I still don't. It's not to say I wouldn't, it's just to say that the brands I work with have really intentionally kind of said, let's keep our own voice here. Because especially when stuff is working, it's really kind of, you don't always want to rock the boat and be like, let's throw a bunch of AI content up and see what happens, So, so I think that's why a lot of the brands I've seen have been a little bit cautious with AI. I, of course, know that a lot of brands have fired all their writers and gone to AI instead. I don't have any case. I do see things occasionally where people will be like, we fired our writers. It's on Twitter usually. We fired our writers, and here's our growth, and maybe I don't know. Does it last? Does it? I don't know. I'm not. So I think AI is like of course, AI is going to be more and more integrated with our content creation. And I think there are so many great ways to like, I went to a cool session on cloning yourself with AI at a conference I was recently at. So it's talking about how to basically train ChatGPT to create you. So I think all of these things are there. I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it can go viral. I'm sure it probably will. I just don't have super good answers for this. I don't know.
Well, and I think this is early days still on. I mean, while AI has now been like pretty much topic of conversation for the past 2 years, there's still a lot of conversation about meaningful use cases, what it can do. This concept, I love the phrase you use, Bill, synthetic information. It's like we have gotten to the point where AI can synthesize things. It's not just a Google search summary. And so like, from what I know about how humans send things viral, also because I feel like we're a virus, like there's a viral nature to our being that exists. And so whether or not there's a piece of synthetic information that goes viral, we don't know. But the possibility is absolutely there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
People get a hold of it. And Bill is also sharing here, he does work in like cybersecurity, that in the world of cyber, it has given the ability of hackers to create more clickable phishing attacks, 100%. Which is unfortunate, but we empower the good while we empower the bad. At the same time.
I think
so from when you look at this from like SEO perspective or a content creation perspective, Chris, because you kind of look at both. Is there anything you would encourage people to be wary of, to be concerned about, or maybe just to, I don't know, let's watch and see?
I think, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of like those type of cybersecurity dangers in terms of like content you would put up on your own website. Maybe there are some. I can't really think of any offhand. So like, if somebody has a website and you don't have a writing team and you want to experiment with putting AI content up, by all means, go for it. I'm not saying like don't ever do it. I don't know. Maybe it'll work, and maybe it'll prove me wrong. Yeah, so I think like I'm all for experimentation. Like I said, like we tend to just do what works and not stray too far because of a fear of like losing the hundreds of thousands of clicks a month that in different places that you generate. So it's like not wanting to rock the boat too much with Google. But I would be experimenting if people want to experiment with AI content on their website. I'm trying to think of like what, I don't know. I don't want to even say like it can't do any harm, because maybe it could, but I can't see the same type of like those type of like the things that Bill is talking about are really scary. But I'm trying to think of like an analogy in SEO, and I can't really think of one because it's just content on your website. But I don't know. Maybe I'll get off of this call and be like, if you do this, it will ruin the world. But I haven't got there yet. So yeah, I mean, AI, I think AI, this is just cliche at this point to say it like this, but AI is a tool, and in the hands of people who have a craft and know what they're doing, and like it just makes those people function even better and create even better. So I'm all for using AI in a lot of different ways. For now, I personally preserve the craft of writing for myself. Maybe I won't always do that. If I find a better way to do it, I might not. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as of today.
I think it depends on like what you're writing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I was going to say things like using like this interview, scraping the transcript with AI and optimizing it and putting it up on a website somewhere, like stuff like that too. Like those are the other AI tools we have for content creation that just make life so much easier. So yeah, if this interview was to be put on your website or something for SEO, I would absolutely do that. So it's just like finding the right ways to use AI, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think that comes back to a lot of the things that we've talked about before, right? And really the reason for being for this show is like, if you're going to do something, know why you're doing it. And if you know why you're doing it, then you can also look at what's impact might AI have on it? What impact might a relationship with UX have on it? What impact might like frequency, recency, all of these things have on it, because you know why you're doing it. Okay, last call to the audience for questions, because those have been some very good questions, but I have one question I'm going to jump to, because earlier, Chris, you used the phrase great content. And I think there is a common misconception that there's like one definition of great content, and I'm trying to create this like one version of great content. So when you say great content, what does that mean to you?
Oh my God, that's a hard question. Yeah, I think like my definition of great content would not be the content that I think is great, but the content that seems to work in terms of people watching and engaging with it. So if I create content that I think is the best thing I've ever written and it falls flat, which has happened, frequently enough, that obviously wasn't great content. And I think that's one of the things about creating content is often something can feel really great in our head or sound really great when we read it out loud to ourselves. But if it doesn't resonate with other people, it doesn't really matter much. So I think that's, yeah, like there's obviously some subjectivity in how we define great content, but I think to some extent, maybe it comes back to that UX thing. Like it has to be great for the person reading it, engaging it, spending time. One of the things that Google uses like for ranking is if people are spending time on your page and reading it and engaging with it. And that's not going to happen just because you put all the right keywords in. That happens because it's good enough content that they're interested. So yeah, I think that's sort of that's sort of my definition. I should say too, though, with virality, like it's pretty rare for SEO articles to go viral. I think like it's kind of a different discipline. So often great content is less to do with like some kind of viral hook that gets, you know, goes wild on social media, and more often it's just like a really good answer to a question, or a really good set of information, or really good visual maybe, or those are the types of things that more often in SEO I think make great content.
Yeah. So, okay, then I have two follow-up questions from that, because I feel like a lot of times when I talk to people about content, they get very stressed about how profound their content needs to be. And from what you last said, it sounds like a lot of times this is really just like a simple answer, a simple image, something that I can very easily engage with, and that it's not necessarily based on this concept of being profound, but it's in like sharing our voice, sharing how we see things, sharing a simple version of something complicated, or honestly being honest about something that is complicated and saying like, hey, this is complex, here's why it's complex. This won't ever be that easy. And so that was just something that was coming to my mind, was that oftentimes we're very judgy of our own content, in that it won't have value, or that it needs to be deeper, it needs to be longer if it's a long form article or things like that. And a lot of times the good content, that meaningful content for your people, are just like an easy way to see it, maybe that they haven't seen it before.
I think one of the things that I love about SEO and this whole kind of discipline is it really is a good place for the whole done is better than perfect thing, that just like hit publish and get it out into the world, because you can always edit it. And it's not the same as like if I write an op-ed and, you know, some newspaper is just out there forever. But if I find a spelling mistake next week, I'll fix it. If I find that something I said didn't make sense, I'll fix it. So you do have the great, I guess maybe this isn't true if you're like submitting to somebody else's website, but generally speaking, you have the ability to keep tweaking and improving content. So I think for overthinkers, like you just need to start hitting publish once in a while and stop getting so in your head about it, because really it's you won't know until you try. And then the other thing I was going to say, like, I remember when I used to write, there used to be a way of writing SEO, and it would be like, you know, I'm trying to think of like the cat question, how do I take care of my cat? And it would be like, having a cat is an important responsibility. Cats can come in all shapes and sizes, and people just like put in this 300 words of crap at the beginning. And one of the things that I'm also realizing is that a lot of the filler, a lot of the ways we write because we think we need to write that way, don't really apply. Like really just like, what do people need? What do they need? Give them what they need, you know, give them some personality. That's great, because people do also like to be entertained. They like to see, you know, you're mentioning the personality side, but above all, it's like, just give them what they need to, what they're looking for. And that's, I don't know, it seems like it shouldn't be rocket science, but you know, some days it's harder than others.
Well, and so this leads very well into my second question, which is about like your target audience, because while I might identify with my target audience, or I may not identify personally. I was having a conversation with a friend earlier. We were talking about like some life scenarios that this group of panelists that we have had, but she has not had that. So she is like, and I think this is very common from a target audience perspective. And this kind of plays into the UX scenario too. We're trying to create a solution, an answer, something for this group of people, but I am not them. I am me. And maybe I've been through my own journey that somewhat matches that, but I also have my unique experience of that. And it's not necessarily their unique experience of that. And so this is why, like, I love what you're saying about the, like, just hit publish, because this is the realm in which we can have fun experimenting in an SEO perspective, right? And you have a blog post, and maybe you have a conversation with a new ideal prospect, and they introduce some new language to you, and you go back and you reintegrate that new language into the blog post. All of this is possible, and it doesn't even have to take that much time, right?
Exactly.
I have a colored pen that I use to write down new stuff that I'm like, oh, this is something I want to remember, mostly because I'm a visual learner and the colors make it easier. But like, then I can go back and I can incorporate that into my language. Or even if you don't necessarily go back, you can try to incorporate that into your language going forward and see how it feels. And while I am not one to only use language because I think it's going to resonate with someone else, it also has to some degree resonate with me. Otherwise, I feel like I'm trying to be in that conversation over there, but I don't want to have that conversation. I want to have this conversation. And like, personally, that's been very productive for me from a business development perspective, not necessarily from an SEO perspective, but from a business development perspective. And so it's just like exploring all of those things. And like, and incorporating, try them on, right? Try them on, see what fits, see what doesn't. And don't be afraid to let go of that old pair of jeans that doesn't fit anymore.
The old pair of jeans. I was thinking too, as you were talking about the curse of knowledge, that it's hard, like when you create content, let's say you've created 100 pieces of content this year on a subject. It's hard to remember that when you create the 99th piece of content, the person who lands on that content might be seeing this for the first time and thinking about it for the first time. So it can be, I think, a challenge, the more content you create, to be like, it feels like I've talked about this ad nauseum, and it feels like everybody knows what I have to think about this, but really, like, that might be the first exposure they ever have to this idea or to this thought. So just as you're saying, like, going back to like, who is this actually for, understanding that is really important. And even as a content creator, writer, it's just trying to pull back to that and recognizing, hopefully, when I've missed it too, which I've done sometimes, because sometimes you have to do, it's like a big part of SEO when you're writing content is going to be customer education. It's going to be like a lot of recognizing that this might be somebody's first time on my website. What do I want them to get out of it? Even if they land on this random page about office furniture, what do I hope they at least, unless it's an office furniture company, in which case you're doing great. But like, what do they need to know? So.
Yeah, and this is like a really great, I'll tell you, like, I write a lot of blog posts, LinkedIn articles, and all those types of things. And I struggle with that concept because I feel like I've said this a million times. And I probably have said it a million times, but that does not mean everybody else has heard it a million times. It might be, maybe it's the second or third time you've heard it because that's kind of your level of participation in my content, but it might be the first time. And so like, I love to just play with the language of the, like, for those of you who know me, you'll know that this, right? But for those of you who don't, I'm going to say it again.
For those of you who are sick of hearing me talk about this, I'm going to say it again.
Just skip to the next line because you know what I'm going to say. But then it's also interesting, right? Because then I feel like we actually had this on the show a couple of weeks ago, or might have been last week. I can't remember, but see, because I create too much content. But like, we were talking about parts of a process that you might outsource. And so as marketer, I talk about one very specific part of marketing that I always outsource because I'm completely useless at it. And I talk about it a lot. And so I said on the show, I'm like, if you guys know what I'm thinking, then write it in the chat. and nobody said anything. And I was like, for real? I haven't said enough that I would never do graphic design. It's not my area of expertise. I use it as an example all the time, but it's also a good example of like how I feel like I say that all the time, but people don't receive that all the time, right? Or that's because that's not even remotely close to the important part. I usually use it as an example, right? It's not the takeaway. And so like, it's just I think a good reminder for us that like, if you're going out and you're saying something because you care about saying it, because you care about taking that stand, take that stand, people. Go and do it, because you're right. It might be the first time somebody is experiencing that, and they might just need somebody who's going to take that stand in their life.
Hopefully you'll get better at it too. I'm thinking of like the stand-up comedian that goes to the same city and says the same thing, or sorry, different cities, and says the thing every time. It's like, you know, after the 40th time of delivering that joke, you feel like it wouldn't be funny. Well, of course it's funny to people hearing it, but the person doing it, but obviously, hopefully you're refining the content and improving. So saying the same thing again and again can work. I mean, a lot of people make a living at it. So
it's true. Although I will tell you, so I'm a Huey Lewis and the News fan.
oh yeah.
And I went to one of his concerts, and he was like, if I'd have known that I was going to have to sing this song every day for the rest of my life, I would never have written it.
Yeah.
About the power of love, because like that is one of his most famous songs. And so it's really interesting even to see that, because then you're like, well, we know what the audience wants, right? They want the power of love, and we're going to sing it even though we don't want to play it anymore. Because I haven't heard it every day of my life for 29 years. Just because you have. But this is, it is, again, I think it comes back to that balance or the harmony between like, yeah, if you're so sick of saying it that you can't say it with conviction anymore, then it's probably something to be explored. But at the same time, there are people who hear different things in what you say than what you hear in what you say or what you write. And so it's important to pay attention to both of those inputs in order to make sure that you're creating your stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, bringing it back to the SEO and keywords question. I think like when I'm looking at creating a website, I often think of like the image of like a frog pond with a bunch of lily pads on it that you're just adding more and more lily pads for people to land on. So coming back to my cat analogy, and I've never worked on a cat website, so I think I feel safe to use it. But yeah, I mean, if somebody comes to my website because they're looking for like how to properly feed your cat, and somebody else comes in because I wrote the article how to properly bathe your cat, and those are two different articles from the one that's like how to care for your cat. I don't know, I'm stretching this a little bit, but the point is like, as you are creating topical authority on something, you are going to have to write about stuff that kind of like overlaps or interacts a bit. So it's honestly also part of the SEO discipline, is like you are going to have to say some of the same things in different ways. You're going to have posts that say the same things, or you know, parts of the same things. Don't copy paste. That's not really ideal. Say it say it again, but because Google doesn't like duplicate content. But you yeah, like as you're creating your body of knowledge, it is important to say some of the same things in different ways and different things in the same ways. I don't know. So that's kind of tying it back into the SEO keyword thing. Like there's definitely a way of thinking about SEO that it is talking about a lot of the same stuff from different angles, so you find different searchers. So
yeah, well, this is actually one of the things I love about this show, is that we're like, come on, and we have the same topic and we're talking about the same thing, but we have different experiences, we have different ways we say things, and then it creates the possibility of someone hearing something they haven't heard before. And for me, like the people who listen to me or read my posts, like they're very familiar with what I'm going to say, with my style. Like it's like pretty consistent, but that doesn't necessarily do a good job of pattern interrupting, right? And if we want to pattern interrupt to accomplish something from a business perspective, then we need to create opportunities for that pattern interrupt. But also you don't want to necessarily have it stray so far from your like body of content that people would be like, well, why is Tracy talking about manufacturing shoes? Really, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I always say, like, if you're chocolate cake, make sure people know you're chocolate cake.
Yeah, that's
not
right.
A pair of shoes.
I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, I use that analogy a lot, and then I immediately want chocolate cake after.
Yeah,
I need to come up with another one that doesn't make me so hungry. Also, now I'm like totally on a chocolate cake tangent, and I'm like, I've had a lot of chocolate cake that isn't very good chocolate cake. So then it makes me mad that I haven't had really good chocolate cake. And then I think that I have Swiss chocolate powder in my pantry, and maybe I should just make a chocolate cake. Anyway, all that just happened in my brain. So now you guys know.
Good.
But I think this is the we've talked about a lot of things in the area of SEO. But I think for me, like one of the biggest things that this comes back to is like, know what you want to accomplish through your SEO efforts. And if you know what that is, then you can talk to an SEO expert expert like Chris, like other SEO experts that can provide more poking, more prodding to make sure that what you're doing is going to be aligned with that outcome. Just know your why. Know why you're wearing that pair of pants. Chris, thank you so much for sharing all your insight with us today. Where is the best place for people to find you if they would like to specifically ask you more questions about SEO or content strategy?
Probably just LinkedIn, Chris Cornthwaite. My name is on the screen. It's kind of, it's a funny spelling. So I want to take a picture of it to write it down, but you can find me in the show announcement is on LinkedIn too. So,
yes. Chris is linked in the show announcement. So you can just click on his name and it'll take you right to his profile. Get connected, ask your SEO questions. And just get into the conversation. If you're currently using SEO or you're currently exploring what value SEO might have for you or for your organization, stay in the conversation, ask the questions, connect with me, connect with Chris, connect with each other, everybody else who is in the chat today. So we had Bill and Kavita and Iker and Judy right at the beginning. And all of you other people who are watching that I can see were here but didn't post anything in the comments. And I always say, post something in the comments because then I'll know you're here. If you have more questions, ask the questions. This is where you learn. This is where we get to try on. Just like the trying on clothes analogy, this is where you get to try on ideas. What fits you from an SEO perspective and what doesn't fit you, and choose what fits you.
And hit publish.
Awesome. And hit publish. That's right.
That's it. Yeah.
We want to see all of you guys publishing content. I think I see most of these guys publishing content, but I want to see more content from everybody that feels like it's, why do I keep not remembering relevant? That is relevant to you and your narrative. Make sure the world knows. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Chris, thank you again so much for sharing your time and knowledge. And with that, everyone, until next time, permission to do you. Bye-bye.